dreamers, a happy, scrappy group of believers. So come, play a part. There's room for mistakes and messes and art. Who cares if there's not many takers? We're doing it for the makers.
Hey everybody, welcome to the For the Makers podcast. We are so excited that you are here on this beautiful day. It is gorgeous outside, Rach.
It is gorge.
It is stunning, if you will. Gorgine, as our friend of the podcast, Caleb Michael Fair, likes to say. You guys, thanks for being here. Hey, quick reminder, we put out our podcast, or I wanted to say present. I don't know why that was the word
the cinnamon that we have for the synonyms that we have for. Oh boy, this is going well so far.
This is good. But we put out our podcast on any listening platform that you catch us on every month, or second and fourth Friday of the month, because you clap on the 2 and the 4.
Not on the 1 and the 3.
You guys, I don't know what's wrong with me. I cannot get it together with these intros. I'm so sorry.
So we, every second and fourth Friday of the month is when the podcasts come out.
Is that not what I said?
No, it is.
Okay.
I just wanted to clarify one more time.
Yeah. Thanks, gentle listener, for your patience. But
words are hard sometimes.
Words are hard. You guys, I would assume that you know who we are, but I'm Lee Beth Etheridge, one of your hosts, and I'm here with the one and only
Rachel Gifford.
And we are so excited that you are here, gentle listener. You guys, today we have such an awesome guest with us. She is a genius in her own right, and we love her so much. Rach, who do we have today?
Today we have Amy Helms, and I'm so excited. Amy, I'm going to do a little reading of your bio. So Amy Helms is a New York-based actor and playwright with her MFA in acting from the FSU Osolo Conservatory for Actor Training Program. Favorite credits include Sophie Scholl in We Will Not Be Silent, Catherine in A View from the Bridge, Ruth Hoch in Book of Days, and Viola in Twelfth Night. Wow. Those are a lot of amazing roles. Her play, The Feeling Variations, is currently in development for a stage reading with New Threads Theater Company, while a 10-minute version of her play, Between in Between, has been selected for the Redland Theater Festival / New Threads Theater New Works Contest Contest and Festival. That's called skipping a line. In her free time, Amy works for a venture capital firm, reads avidly, and hosts sourdough bread eating parties for her friends, which LB and I have benefited from.
Yes.
Recently, she has started to quilt and is loving every minute. Amy Helms, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
We're so glad to have you. And truly, this bio is
fire.
Really striking, actually, because it's so cool. I mean, you've played some pretty amazing women.
Yeah.
That is quite the list. And then you have multiple plays in the works.
I do. How weird is that?
Do you feel official when you hear that in your bio?
You know, it's weird because I think fairly early on, Artist Way, all of that, I was like, all right, we're claiming it.
Yeah.
We're just claiming it. So I still do consider myself very much like a very young playwright. I'll call myself a baby playwright. But yeah, there are now 2 titles, so...
Oh my gosh.
How about them apples?
Let's go. Let's freaking go.
And LB and I have had the honor of being able to read The Feeling Variations a couple times.
You've been very generous hosts of Feeling Variations readings.
Gentle listener, as the friend of the podcast, Rachel Lind,
coined.
So LB and I, we live in a 4-bedroom apartment, and we have a good amount of space for a New York City apartment. And so it is like our greatest joy when we get to gather a group of friends and like read something all together. And so we've been able to host 2 readings, right, of this play at our apartment. And it's been so cool to see the process that just all the changes that have been made. And I don't know. It's just so fun. And usually Amy brings sourdough, and it's just a total win all around.
Yeah, no downside to that situation
Never.
whatsoever.
Listen, you gotta say thank you with food, right?
Yes. Oh my gosh. That's like the fact that you just said that, it's like so heartwarming. Like truly, like I think that sometimes like people don't think that in New York you find like hospitable friends, but then you bring sourdough bread as a thank you to the party.
That is homemade sourdough bread. Like
it's like made with love.
baked with love.
Yeah.
a lot of love.
A lot of love.
And a whole lot of hope that it rises properly.
Spoken like a true baker.
Truly.
I love that. So, Amy, we met, the three of us all met at Through the Hang,
Yeah.
which is a Christian arts ministry in New York. And then, honestly, we've just like become dear friends. And we've known each other for 5 years now, I want to say.
Yeah,
Yeah,
just
Or
about.
close to, yeah.
Just about, yeah.
And, pandemic friends that were with you through the pandemic. Like,
It's true.
Yeah.
you build bonds.
Yeah.
Okay.
You definitely do.
Yeah, you said 5 years, and I was like, no, there's no way it's been that
I
long.
know.
And I was like, yes.
Yeah.
2.5 of those were COVID years.
Yeah, I know, right? Your
Yeah.
timeline gets a little like skewed there, but
Oh yeah, without a doubt.
yeah,
It's been cool though to watch you, Amy, because I remember pre-pandemic, you always were an incredible performer and an incredible artist as a whole, but then watching you come into your own as a writer has been so cool to watch.
Yeah.
And like Rach said, being able to host, readings of your plays and just watching you take all of them in and having all of your notes out and doing the whole thing. It's just been such a cool experience because we all knew you were an incredible actor. That's like
Yeah.
not even a question.
Yeah.
We don't even need to go down that route. Like we can just set that aside and be like, yeah, we understand.
Obviously.
But seeing you come into your own as a playwright has been so cool to
Yeah.
watch.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a really interesting journey. I was the actor who just wanted to act, and I would have severe anxiety when anyone started being like, well, these days you can't just be an actor, like you have to do more, you have to be a multi-hyphenate, you have to do all these things. And I was like, but I don't want to. And then one day in May 2020, I just woke up and I was like, all right, I'd like to write a play now. And I don't know, like people are like, what more is there? Like,
Right.
what happened? And I was like, nothing. I literally woke up one day and like the Spirit of the Lord in me said, good morning.
Write a play
I'd like
now."
to write a play now.
yeah,
Wow.
Yeah. And so then that was interesting because oftentimes we're working on it, but my tolerance for less than stellar art in myself is quite low.
Sure.
And so then it was a process of, I had never had a playwriting class. I had never read a book on
Right.
playwriting. I had no idea what I was doing. So, started taking some classes, started reading some books, started just being like, hey, it does not have to be good, quote unquote, because I think good and bad when it comes to art are not helpful words
I
at
would
all.
agree with that.
But it's hard because we use them a lot in our culture. So it's like when you're trying to think of
Right.
like, well, what's the replacement for this? But starting to give myself the permission to be like, it doesn't have to be anything. The magic is in the rewriting.
Right.
Like you just got to get something down. And yeah. And then it started and it hasn't really stopped. So
yeah.
we'll see.
Do you find like since that day that you woke up and you were like, I would like to write a play now, do ideas come more easily to you?
Yeah.
Are you just like constantly like, oh, I could do this? Is it like new, does it usually have to do with like whatever you're working on? Or is it like new play ideas? Like I could write something else about XYZ.
Yeah, I think, well, it depends. If I'm like flowing on something and then all of a sudden the project that's in the front of my brain will be like, ooh, we could do this. We could go here. We could hop on this. Sometimes it is a brand new idea.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a new idea for a play that is in the queue. Madeline Lingle uses the analogy of when she was writing, she's like, I'd have the story that was on the front burner, but then I'd have a couple stories on the back burners, and I'd walk by and I'd put a carrot in one and I'd put an onion in the other, and I'd stir, and so
Oh, that's a
I've
great image.
kind of started, I feel like, doing that in a way where I just I'm actually dreading getting a new phone because I'm going to have to figure out
All
like
your notes,
my notes.
yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I'm like, do I type them up? Do I take screenshots? Like, I'll have to figure it out. If anyone has any ideas, let me know.
Okay.
But yeah, so started like just dropping different ideas as they come into different ideas. And I'm taking a playwriting class right now about adaptation, and I've had, a couple new ideas based off that. So I was worried there wouldn't be any other ideas after the first one, and that's not proving to be
not
the
true,
case.
yeah.
So,
Yeah, I do
Yeah.
wonder if that's like something that gives like writers anxiety sometimes.
yes.
Yeah. Of like, okay, I have this idea, but like, is there going to be anything else that comes?
Yes. Yeah.
Have you ever been in a situation where you feel like you have to, I don't want to say like you have to force an idea to come, because I feel like sometimes ideas come easily and you're just like, oh, this would be fun. And then you get really excited about it. And then sometimes you're like, no, like I need to have a disciplined moment and sit down and say, okay, what could I write about? Like, has that happened to you yet? Or is it usually like inspiration is just, it's still striking?
I think I haven't gotten to that point yet where I'm like, I must sit down and think about things. I've had instances where I'm like, I would like to work on this story next. And then I sit down to work on that story and I'm like, this is an incredible concept that is going to make a great play. I have no idea what the play is or where it's going right now. I just have the vehicle. So that's typically, I haven't yet gotten to the point where I've been like, I need to sit down and figure it all out right now. I've moved that back to the back burner and been like, okay, we'll come back. And then I'll maybe pull another, if we're using the metaphor, pop forward. And I'll be like, oh, I know where this is going. I think I know where this is going. I think I have an idea of beginning, middle, end, and how it's going to carry me there. And so, yeah, I have definitely been like, I'm working on this one next. There's a Christmas play idea. I really wanted to do a Christmas in July reading at your apartment.
Yeah.
And that was one where it was just like, I don't know. We're
where-
not there yet.
yeah.
I'm not. So
Yeah.
who knows? But it'll get there. I have faith that I will write it eventually.
Yeah.
I also do a lot. So the Feeling Variations is written in a vignette style.
Right.
The first draft was 9 individual vignettes within the same world. And then it changed to be 3 stories, but each story was 3 parts that are all kind of intermixed. So I wrote a lot of 10-minute plays for the Feeling Variations. So I'm finding, and then I wrote a 10-minute play for Between and Between. I'm currently in the process of expanding that to a full length. And so I'm finding it is often very helpful for me to sit down and write a fully polished 10-minute version.
Yeah.
And
That's
then
really good.
it's very helpful, but then I get frustrated when I'm like, I have to go back and I have to expand this and like,
Right. You're like, I feel
Like,
like
this
this
has
is
such a great
you know,
ending
this
for-
one
yeah.
page is really shiny because it was part of the 10-minute, and then everything else is,
Right.
not polished yet. But I have found that is helpful for me to clarify the ideas that I'm thinking about, the containers that I'm looking at using, the things I'm going to be asking the actors. And it's like, if it works in a 10-minute play, I could make it work in a full length.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. This is such a practical question, but when you're thinking about like a 10-minute play, is that like 10 pages? Is it how do you kind of gauge that?
So typically, your general rule of thumb is a minute a page.
Okay.
I tend to leave a little bit more space for the actors. I am developing my own lexicon. I use a lot of ellipses to create space. I don't like using the word beat or pause. That feels stilted to me in a lot of ways. So it will be very interesting, like with the staged reading of Feeling Variations. I'm interested to see, is there too much space in the script?
Right.
Is there not enough? Does it work?
Yeah.
that kind of thing. But yeah, typically they say a minute a page, so 10 pages. I have seen some where it's like it's a 10-minute or a short minute play festival, no longer than 12 pages. So
got it.
It depends.
Okay.
It depends.
So different people kind of gauge it different ways. And of course, like I just didn't even think of writers have such different styles. And when I read a play, there's so often a ton of space on the page or there's like none at all. And you're like, this is a lot of stage direction or a lot of, I mean, some of them are just very text heavy.
Yeah.
So,
well, and then there's the experience of the difference between a page or a play on the page versus a play in actuality. When I did Book of Days, I, like the good little actor I was, ordered all the plays we were going to be doing the summer before auditions and was reading them. I think I was trying to read everything twice just to be familiar for when I walked into auditions. And Book of Days, I read it through once fully, and I think I only made it through like a third of the way, a half of the way through the second time, and I couldn't finish it.
wow.
I could not finish it, and it's a Langford Wilson,
Right.
Like,
Yeah. Right.
he knows what he's doing, you know.
Right.
And then went in, auditioned, was cast as Ruth, and ended up, it's one of my favorite plays that I've done. And so the experience of doing the play was
Very different.
much different. And so that's the other interesting thing too, is,
Right.
Right.
these plays are not meant to live on
the
a page.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, I felt the same way when I read Angels in America, because we read it in school, and I remember reading it and just feeling like I was banging my head against the wall.
Yeah.
I was like, this thing is so long, and it is just so much information, and it's a lot to take
dense,
in.
yeah.
It's so dense. And then I remember over not too long after the pandemic, I got the National Theater online streaming service, and they have the Marion Elliott version of Angels in America up there with Andrew Garfield and Nathan Lane. And
I saw that in London in the front row.
how dare you? How dare you?
Yeah.
Okay, well, you guys,
You
thanks
just
for coming on
dropped
to our
that. Yeah.
Thanks for having Amy on our podcast today. We will end right now. No, it was just, I remember watching it, and because I watched part one and then I had to take a pause. I like put it away, and I was like so emotionally just destroyed. And then I came back to part two and I was even more destroyed.
Yep.
It was just powerful.
So you ready for this?
Oh gosh, okay.
So we did, when I was in London with my grad program, we did rush tickets,
Yeah.
and we did both parts in the same day.
Oh gosh.
Lin-Manuel Miranda
Nope.
was 3 rows behind us.
What?
And so after the first one, we were waiting for all of our group to gather to go find food before we went back in for another 3 hours, right?
Right.
And he was in the bookstore, and one of my classmates said, I can't not.
Go up.
So
Yeah.
she walks up to him, and I'm standing there saying, I'm not going to stand here waiting while you... So I ran after her. So
Yeah.
I shook his hand. You know, she chatted. She knew some people who had been in some of his shows. So chatted a minute, left the theater, and I promptly started to sob. Like the combination of Angels in America, Andrew Garfield,
Stunning.
I walked out of that show being like, who is this man?
Yeah, his performance.
And I need to rewatch everything he's ever done.
Yeah.
Spider-Man, you kidding?
Come on.
And then like that, and then sobbing. And then we went back for part 2. So
Oh gosh.
That sounds like the best day at the theater ever.
Truly.
it was intense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that is that's a heavy play to see the full. Yeah.
It's I did want to ask you, because in writing, and then we can get into questions.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, you're
But in writing feelings, which is something totally completely original and brilliant. And then you have In Between, which is inspired by a previously written play little unknown one called Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah. No one's heard of that one before.
Who is that? Never read her before. But is your process different in writing those pieces based upon more of an adaptation style piece and a completely original piece? And also, in between is not vignettes. It's a completely only 2 actors, completely, original piece, whereas completely streamlined piece. Whereas Feelings is a much bigger cast with different vignettes.
Much bigger with 6 people in the cast.
Exactly. A full 6 humans.
Casting directors listening, it is a economic option in today's theatrical climate.
Totally.
So if you'd like to get a hold of Amy Helms.
Yeah, exactly.
Please reach out to the ladies at Seated.
Yeah, exactly.
Actually, though.
Yeah, really. But I'm just curious about your process for both of those.
Well, it's interesting because Feelings really did start out as vignettes. And I really did imagine it as freestanding vignettes, something that could be done with a cast of 4, or something that could be done with a cast of 18.
Right.
And then it changed for the better, definitely. And it tightened up, and instead of focusing on 9 pieces of stories, we focused on 3.
Right.
And that was wild, trying to figure out these stories that I had already kind of written in their full form, being like, okay, well, how do I expand this?
Yeah.
And it did. It was the work of the Lord and the Holy Spirit. Let me be very clear about that. I have very little control over everything. And I'm a firm believer too in listening to the story and telling the story that wants to be told. Yeah. So, I can write whatever I want, but if I'm not listening, if I'm not following the story, it is not going to feel right and will probably be cut.
Yeah.
Very soon after.
Yeah.
That's a really good point.
Yeah. I'm a big believer in it. And as a Christian, as a believer, I sometimes struggle with saying I believe in listening to the story. I believe in listening to the character living in me. Because I do also believe that, yes, simultaneously it is the story, it is the character, but it is also the Holy Spirit. Mm-hmm. So to me, those aren't necessarily 2 separate things.
Synonymous. Yeah.
They maybe have there are different pieces, but I think they interact in the same way. But the interesting thing with Between, which is a Romeo and Juliet adaptation, is that I'm interested in the ideas that I'm exploring, rather than being religiously strict to the story of Romeo and Juliet. Mark Shanahan, the teacher of this playwriting class I'm taking right now, wonderful teacher, wonderful playwright. He really talked a lot, our first class, about fidelity to source material and how that is something that we don't have to be bound by. And I think that's something that is ringing really true in between. It actually started with this idea of what is loving your enemies. Can love on its own, separate from God, actually change people's hearts when they hate someone else? There are a lot of different areas in our world right now where, yes, people are like, oh, we need legislation around this, we need policy change, we need this. But then to change the heart, it comes down to, well, you need to love more, and that changes it. And so that was sort of the idea that I was interacting with first. And then, different pieces came in. I read a thing about feuding families, and I read a thing about immigrants, coming over to America from Scotland. And then it just sort of all kind of came together that it's this is a Romeo and Juliet story, but looking at it very specifically through the lens of this question.
Right.
And I am not bound to Romeo and Juliet as it is.
Right.
And I think that's interesting. I've had a couple of people say like, oh, well, you know, is so-and-so going to die at the end because Romeo and Juliet? And I'm like, well, I don't know, but I can tell you right now, no. Like,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
But there's something very freeing about that. The
Right.
idea of you can adapt something, but you don't have to follow. You have the roadmaps, you have the skeleton, you have the mile markers that you can check in on.
Right.
And you can stretch the story and you can play with it within the bounds.
Yeah.
You know? There's a lot of freedom in containers. This is something I learned when I started writing. The more specific of a container that you give yourself, even though it can feel limiting, it's often more freeing as you get playing and get creating.
Right.
And you can go crazy, crazy things within a very specific container.
Yeah.
And that's you know, what we're here for. We're here
Yeah.
for creating fun, wild
Right.
things
Yeah.
That's
in an
funny.
inch of space.
Yeah.
Right.
That's Amy and I talk about acting technique often.
We do often.
And I'm a Meisner girl. And Meisner is all about simple and specific, to give to give you your container essentially so that you can then like play. And it's so funny because there are so many things now in my creative life. I know you've studied Demidov, which has similarities.
Yeah, there are similarities. Demidov, for those who don't know,
Yeah, please
because it
explain.
is not a widely known thing in the United States. Demidov was the person that Stanislavski wanted to take over Moscow Art Theater. He passed away before Stanislavski did, so he could not. In An Actor Prepares, the last chapter on imagination is Stanislavski realizing that maybe Demidov discovered something that he didn't, and he should include that in the book.
Stretch for Slavsky.
But the book is already written, so let's just throw one last chapter in there.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a very organic technique. It focuses a lot on imagination and subconscious technique. A lot about training your subconscious as an actor. There is a Demidov association ran by my professor, Andrei Malov-Babel. If anyone would like to check that out, definitely recommend. But yes, there are some similarities to Meisner. We do a lot of repeating of lines in a process to drop it in, stuff like that. We tend to do it. Well, I'm not sure how Meisner has you do it in terms of emotions. We do it completely blank. So we try, like when we're dropping in lines, we try to learn them completely blank with nothing on them.
Yeah. You do start robotic with Meisner. And then,
Go from there.
We can talk about that.
Listen, this podcast could be 8 hours long if we get going on acting technique.
But it's so funny. Every time I hear the words simple and specific, I'm like, Meisner?
Meisner?
Yeah. Okay. Oh,
Sorry.
I was going to jump into the questions.
Jump in. Okay. We could talk about
Well, we can swing
this.
it, like around too.
Yeah. You
Okay.
no. Just
I got you. Amy,
Yes.
what got you into the arts?
So it was interesting. So I was trying to prepare for this question. I was like, what got me into the arts?
Yeah.
And kind of like writing, when I woke up one day and said, let's start writing, I've always wanted to be an actor. And when I say always, I mean like in my DNA, like that's like I came out of the womb. When I was really little, and I don't have any memories of this. When I was little, my dad would put me to bed and would say I would just start crying. He'd be like, but Daddy, I just have to act. And he'd look at me and he'd go, okay, sweetie, but child actors don't transition well. So let's talk about it when you're older.
That's hilarious.
So the drive has always been there. I would be a kid like getting depressed watching movies because I'd say, well, why am I not up there?
Oh, wow.
And dabbled through, theater camp,
Yeah.
dabbled. And then in high school, really committed, got serious, started cutting things out for it and went that way. But yeah, I think honestly, that's how God made me. It's what he wanted me to be, and it's like knit in me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. I feel that. I know it because it just like pours out of you. And it's like, there's something about it too in you that's so beautiful because it is very generous. And LB and I have both, like coached with Amy before, like worked monologues and things. And I think I did a Demidov class led by you.
I don't know if I led it, but I was definitely there.
Yeah. Anyway, but there's just like, Amy's so, I don't know, you're just so generous in your art. And I think that that's something really, it's just really special when you come across people like that. And then even in your writing and in your sharing of your writing, like it always feels like a gift to the people who are getting to hear you talk about it or be a part of the process. I don't know. There's just something in you that that's what it feels like. Yeah.
Thank you. I love, and maybe the classmates that I'm with right now will say too much, but I love hearing the projects that people are working on and being like, what's your thing? What's your dream? What are you working on?
Yeah.
You need help? I would love to just listen and be like, oh, this strikes me. This is interesting. So yeah, I love working with actors. I love listening to my friends talk about their ideas. Rachel Gifford.
Amy and I have talked a lot about me starting to write plays.
Rachel has a wonderful idea, and I'm impatiently waiting for pages. So someday she's going to gift me with that.
I was about to say, as we all are, yes.
But yeah, I love hearing the ideas that people are working on and getting excited with them in that, and love coaching, love finding people and meeting people in that and seeing what they bring. And yeah, it's awesome.
Why do you think the arts are important?
Well, I think the arts hold a really special spot, and artists across fields hold a really special spot in that they affirm our humanity. They open us up to be able to deal with things that we can't confront head on. They resonate at a different frequency than I think, maybe a typical conversation would, or something like that. We talked a lot in grad school, and I've really embraced and adopted this idea of, particularly actors, it's what I know best, but actors being the people who stand in the gap for the audience. So if an audience member comes in, when they see an actor going through the emotional life, the traumas, the pain, the joy, the love, and survive doing that, that tells the audience member, you too can go through this and survive.
Yeah.
And so I think like that's also something that's so valuable about the arts, right? Is you can go there and you can feel seen and loved and challenged and called out, and things can hit a little too close to home.
Yeah.
But you can also see all of these people, hopefully, living that same experience. And you can forget, right? We say acting is living truthfully in imaginary circumstances. But hopefully you can forget that the circumstances are imaginary.
Right.
And can watch these people then actually living through these things that you have or are living through, or that unbeknownst to you, you are going to be living through. And that just gives the courage and the love to like help you keep going.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so good. My brain over here is like
Mic drop.
Yeah. And I think that's one reason why maybe this art form of theater has survived for so long, even through the creation of film, even through the creation of, you know, other forms of art that seemingly accomplish something similar. There is something very special about being in a room experiencing a life on stage.
It's also a completely different thing, and film's great.
Yeah.
But theater will always exist separate from film,
Right.
because it is something entirely different to be breathing the same air and to actually be in the
Right.
same space as the people doing it.
Right, without a doubt.
And I think that's one of the reasons, too, why celebrity casting in plays, I mean, beyond the economic, everything, I get it. But one of the reasons why people freak out so much when there are celebrities in plays is because then you get this sense of like, I'm in the same room with them. I was this close to them. We breathed the same air.
Right.
And hopefully I got to see them bear a piece of their soul, and their soul resonated with my soul, and left me feeling a tiny bit more human than I felt when I walked in.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the thing.
And you don't have to be a celebrity to do that.
Heyo.
Hey.
That's true. Yeah, and going back to Shakespeare, I mean, he talks about that in Hamlet with the holding the mirror up to nature. It's like one of my favorite quotes from one of his plays, but it's this idea of us as, you know, theater makers being able to hold a mirror up to people as artists, and them saying, oh, I see myself, or, oh, I see this other person I know, or I recognize that circumstance, or I recognize, you know, whatever that may be. And therefore, in light of what I'm seeing on stage, how then do I live?
Well, and because now my brain is firing when you say that, because it's not just holding a mirror.
Right.
I would even take it so far as say is it's maybe not necessarily a mirror. Sorry, Will. It's a frame. Because the reflection in the mirror is not the audience member looking at themselves and seeing their reflection. It is, but it's them seeing the actor through the lens. And so the reflection is the actor.
That's good, yeah.
So it is a reflection. It is a mirror. It is the audience seeing themselves reflected in what's happening on stage. But then that requires the actors, the directors, the designers, everyone on stage to have created a reflection of life.
Right.
And to have created something that can be reflected. And you can't control that. Listen, you can never control what someone walks away from your art with. If you try to do that, I'm sorry, I have very strong opinions about it. That is what propaganda is. But but it's also not up to you to control that. Right? Like, leave that to the Holy Spirit.
Right.
He's got it going on, you know? But if you're actually living, truthfully living, then that, I think, opens up the door for this reflection, right? Because when you're living, that's when the imaginary starts to fall away.
Right, exactly.
That's when you can't look away. That's when the breath of the actor and the breath of the audience start to sync. That's when it gets completely silent and no one's coughing and no one's shuffling because they're all just busy breathing together.
Right.
When that isn't happening, you know, then it opens up room for me as the audience or me as the actor to start thinking about my grocery list.
Right.
To start being like, oh, is that person going to fall off the chair?
Right.
Oh,
right.
Look at, I don't know, anything around, you know?
Yeah.
I always start fixing things when things are, I'm like, how would I
Have done that.
Have done that, but differently.
Yeah. You know?
Yeah. There's one show that I saw that I think did that incredibly well was The Ferryman.
I saw it twice.
Yeah, that was so good.
I saw it the week before the cast change out. And I was so affected. I was like, I have to see this before the cast changes. I literally walked up to the box office and I was like, I don't want to spend too much money, but what have you got? And they were like, we've got 2 seats left, one, here and one like in the mezz for $165. And I was like, here's my credit card. Like, thank you so much.
Yeah.
I literally called my dad after and I was like, this is why we have credit cards. It wasn't an emergency, but it was an emergency, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
I went through the whole justification too of like, I'm very careful with my money. I'm a saver. So that when things like this come up every couple of years when I'm like, I must see this again, I can pay full price for a ticket. And my dad was like, okay. Like, it's your money. Like, spend it how you want.
Like, thank you. I just needed validation.
I was like, thank you. I did. Yes. But yes, the ferryman. I still think about it.
Yeah, because there's for the gentle listener who does not know, there's a huge shock thing at the very end of the play. I won't tell you what it is. That way
you can't ruin it.
Reveal that
you can go and
I'm waiting
pick
for
up
the
the play.
revival.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so good.
But there's something really, really shocking that happens at the end. And it happens like at the very end. So like it
the last
happens,
like 35 seconds.
Yeah, it happens and then the play's over.
Yeah.
And so you have built this entire time in this world with this one particular family and their way of life and what's going on with them as they're living in Ireland. And it's a lot is happening. And it all builds to this very ending moment. And then it happens and the play's over. And I distinctly remember going to see this play. And at the very end, this thing happens. Curtain comes down, lights come on, and not a soul moved.
Oh, I don't think my roommate and I spoke until we were like a stop away from our house on the train.
Yeah.
Like we got up, we left the theater, we walked down the stairs, we went to the subway, we got on our train, we sat side by side, and we did not speak.
Yeah. And that's to me, that's exactly what you're talking about, is that moment in which everyone is having a collective experience because of what's being truthfully presented on stage. And it's that moment of, what do we do now? Sort of moment.
The moment where it feels like you don't want to break the silence. Like even clapping
feels wrong.
Felt like
yes,
irreverent.
I remember feeling that. I was like, I would rather not clap, and I feel like you as the actor
would prefer
be
me
like,
not to.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
But let's also talk about that cast. It was a massive cast. The fact that it ran for several years with a cast that size, massive cast, about half of them, if not more, were children.
Yeah.
And a duck. And let's just take a moment and say the adults were so dropped in that the children didn't upstage them when they were on scene, and the children were so dropped in that the duck didn't upstage them when they were on. Like, you always, when we were first learning about Demidov, there's this story that they tell of a cat that walks on stage during a performance with these two master actors. They're like, the second the cat walks on stage, everyone started ignoring the actors and was just watching the cat, because the cat was so singular in every single movement.
Right.
And children are very much the same way. And so the fact that none of those things, like, you weren't sitting there watching the duck while the scene was happening. Yeah. You weren't watching the kids messing around. All, those kids were brilliant.
They were so good.
And the lines that they had.
So funny.
So good.
There's in one opening part of the show, I don't remember if it's the opening of Act 2 or if it was a scene change or what it was, but there's a baby, a fresh bean. A fresh baby.
A little one.
Little nugget.
I remember seeing the audition postings for that.
Okay.
I remember seeing like every couple of weeks.
Right.
Yeah.
Just like a fresh posting for this
Infant.
little nugget.
For the ferryman.
Yeah. And
EPA. Just kidding.
yeah, EPA. We'll have you read a couple lines. No, this baby is just laying on stage in like a little bassinet thing. And it's, the baby lays there.
Of Act 2.
Act 2, yeah. The baby lays there for like at least a minute, if not a little bit longer than that. And the whole audience is enraptured with this child.
Oh, yeah.
Like this child.
Singular.
Yeah. And it's not even like the baby's doing much. Like every once in a while the baby would coo and like his hands would maybe like move and like his feet would flop around. But that was pretty much it.
But I think that's the thing, right? Babies, animals, they are completely singular. Mm-hmm. They are only doing what they want to do. Like the thought of I want to wave my hand happens and they
do it.
Doesn't happen. Like they have the impulse, their hand moves, they wave, it's done, they do something else.
Right.
You know? And that's so beautiful. And we as adults are just trying to get back to that, you know?
Right.
It's amazing how much you have to unlearn in theater school.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Gosh. Wow.
Sorry.
So much we have to unlearn.
Wait, actually, with that, Amy,
Yes.
the third question is, what keeps you grounded as a human?
Well,
When you want to wave your hand.
when I want to wave my hand. When I want to wave my hand, I wave my hand.
Yes, love that.
Or if I can't wave my hand, you know, I acknowledge I'd like to wave my hand right now and I can't. Usually those things are a lot worse than waving your hand.
Yeah.
Faith definitely keeps me grounded. I do a lot of reading about faith and art integration. I
Yeah.
think that keeps me grounded. My family, my parents, I always say they weren't really tough love, but my parents are very much like if I call them with a problem, they're like, okay, calm down. Like, how are, you know, like,
Let's fix it.
Let's
Yeah.
talk through it, whatever. So if I call my parents and I'm like, this happened and then this, or like this, and they go, wow, wow. I'm like, I knew it was bad. You know, but
Yeah.
my parents are wonderful. They're incredibly wise. Everyone loves them. And so yeah, they keep me grounded as well. I have a great brother, great sister-in-law. They help. Friends. Going to see things can hurt sometimes depending on how vulnerable I'm in. Because I'll be like, why is it not me? Or what am I, you know,
Sure.
or like, you know, or that's what I want to do. I just,
Yeah.
But seeing good work, interacting with good work, interdisciplinary,
Yeah.
is so
That's
helpful.
important.
Also, the creative things, let's put that, art is overstating it. The creative things that I can do for nothing except pure enjoyment.
Yeah.
They don't have to be monetized. They don't even have to be good. And frankly, I don't care. You know, for me, that's baking bread and now quilting. Two things that also I've always been like, I've always wanted to do these things.
Yes.
And, you know.
Those bucket list items where you're like, check.
Yeah. But it's those things are so nice because me as an artist, there are things that I care a lot about and will only put out into the world when it is at a level and a quality that I am comfortable with sharing. I have shown up to people's houses and been like, this is the flattest loaf of bread I've ever made. I don't know what happened, but it's going to taste fine. Happy to share. Like, there was one time I was baking bread for my book club and my oven went out.
Oh, no.
And I was like, well, I don't want to waste the dough. So I kid you not, I literally baked it on the stove a la Pioneer style.
What?
Oh, yeah. I went full Pioneer and I was like, we are not letting this go to waste. I baked it on the stove.
How?
Wow.
How did you get it like an even bake?
Oh, I didn't. It was like, think of it, it was like a very fat pancake. Think of it, it was like a giant English muffin.
Oh.
It was like a giant English muffin.
Okay.
And the top and the bottom burned, and I just like looked at them and I was like, scrape it off. Like,
Yeah.
charcoal's good for the diet. Like,
Yeah, like, whatever.
The oven stopped, but you will still have your bread.
Right.
And we ate the whole thing, you know?
Well, of course, because it always tastes good.
Of course.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, I'm starting to quilt right now. Triangles are hard. I literally will open up my seams and uncheck them and be like, this seam looks great. What the heck happened there? Who cares? I'm not taking it out.
Right.
Like, you know?
Yeah.
But having those things that are relaxing, restorative, but also creative,
Right.
are really important. I also had a teacher, and I think this is an amazing insight. I had a teacher, my first playwriting teacher, said, there's no such thing as writer's block. What happens when you have quote unquote writer's block is you've stopped reading.
Ooh.
So it's not an issue with
Yeah.
your writing.
Right.
It's not a writing issue.
Right.
It's a reading issue. And he's like, if you find that you are struggling with writer's block, ask yourself when you last read something. And I would say it extends beyond reading. We're not all readers, but
Sure.
when was the last time you went to an art museum, you went to a show, you put story, art, creativity in?
Right.
And I think that's really beautiful.
Really important too.
And really important. Yeah.
Yeah. I think we've all felt that before too.
Yeah.
You know, because you'll be like, I have writer's block, or I just can't, I'm stuck here. And then you like go see something, and it's the little like inspiration bucket that you got to keep filled.
Yeah.
You know?
Rach, tell the people what your dad said.
I think I said this the last
Did you?
season. Yeah. But my dad, essentially, when I first moved here, when I was kind of like creating my budget, he was like, you got to make sure you have some room in there for inspiration. And I was like, I was thinking that was like a frivolous, that was like an extra. And he's like, no, it's a necessity.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's so true. To just keep me, I mean, I think he probably knew better than I did that like moving here there were going to be a lot of like speed bumps, and I was going to hit a lot of walls. And sometimes the things that keep us going are being inspired and having our brains expand by getting to see other works of art.
Yeah.
Or read.
And you see it across the board, right? Julia Cameron, it's the art estate.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, this
Right.
guy, it was reading or putting in other forms of art. Yeah, I think there are so many different ways of looking at it, but it is a necessity. I would argue it's a necessity for any person, not just an artist. But going back to question number 2, why is art important?
Yep.
Yeah.
You know, it's a necessity, but I think particularly for artists, for creative people, it's you have to, you know, refill yourself. You can't just create. Your sustainment doesn't come from just creating. You have to be putting things back in.
Right.
And sometimes that is effortless.
Right.
And sometimes you look around and you're like, why do I feel horrible?
Yeah.
And you're like, that's because I haven't done anything. I haven't read anything. I haven't watched anything. I haven't gone anywhere.
Right.
And then you have to be a little bit more intentional about it.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So true.
There's a poet that I love, and she always talks about how like a way that she kind of like goes about writing her poetry is when her cup feels full of inspiration, that's when she writes her poetry. So it's like she reads a lot of, like, we were talking about novels that we like, you know, she reads a lot of fantasy. She watches a lot of, you know, TED Talks and things like that with people who use really high language. She fills her cup with words, and then she's like, okay, now I can spill over and write a poem because now I have language that I didn't have before. They're inspiring me to describe or give a certain kind of poetry that I haven't tried before. So it's like, as an artist, you know, we're like, well, it's inside of me, so I should just be able to like generate it. And it's like,
I wish.
yeah,
I know.
exactly.
I wish. But you know, I think there is something to that. We tell ourselves, but I've heard it from other people too. So I'll use the we, pardon me if I'm speaking for people, you know, but we tell ourselves that in order to create in order to be able to be a creative person, we have to have all of these things. And it varies from person to person. Some people are like, well, I must be writing every day. Well, that would be nice, but maybe that's not what works for you. Or I need to have a lot of free time.
Right.
Or I need to, I don't know. There's so many different things, right? And sometimes that's not always the case. You know, I wrote the Feeling Variations while working 50 hours a week.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
you know, and it was primarily from 5:15 to 5:30 in the morning, 5:15 to 5:40 in the morning. And that's how the first draft was written.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, I personally do function better when I have more structure. So if I have a lot of free time, I will not write a single word. If I'm like, I have to go spend 8 hours at work, I may have less time to write, but I will actually be writing, and chances are the quality of what I'm writing will be higher.
Right.
Some people don't work like that. Some people are like, no, I need a full X amount of hours. And so then they have to figure out how to work their life around that, right? But I think it's important to also examine what are the things that I am telling myself I need in order to create versus what's the reality.
Right.
And believe me, I would love nothing more than to not have to go to work every day 9 to 5, like to have something that was more flexible or less hours so that I could have all this time to be creative. But I've worked that job before for several years.
Right.
And guess what? I didn't write a play during that time.
Yeah.
Right? Like I did creative things, but I was not more creative than
had more time.
than I am now. You know, so it's you know, take what you need, create what you need, but also examine those things of being like, is this actually helpful to me in how I create? And then be brave enough to change that if the answer is no.
Right. Ooh, Amy, I think I need
That's
a
really
reminder.
good. Yeah. Dang.
Amy comes in clutch with the advice, like right in the nick of time.
Yeah.
I gotta say.
And then you're like, oh, dang it.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh,
No, but it's like the
man.
best. It's like it feels so good.
Yeah, you're like, that's really good.
Yeah.
I gotta go examine my life now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, listen, let me share too, because it is true in my life. So I had gotten into, especially during COVID, I had gotten into this idea that rest was doing nothing. Rest was like some form of me mostly or totally horizontal on my bed or couch watching Netflix or scrolling Instagram.
Right.
Like that was quote unquote rest. I felt horrible after doing that. Especially on the weekend, I would get so depressed. I'd be like, I haven't done anything. And so I've been going on this process trying to reframe what is rest for me. What activities are restorative and are active. Like what are things to do? And so I'm finding things like quilting. I've started organizing. I was never the person who organized. Apparently that was my teenage rebellion where I just told my parents, I came in one day and I was like, they said at school that teenagers have messy rooms. So good luck trying to make me clean. Like apparently I said that. I have no idea. But but it's like, I've started getting this place where I'm like, ooh, all right. It's when my room is starting to get stressful, it is restful and restorative for me to tidy that up.
Right.
It is restful and restorative for me to go for a walk, to call a friend, to, XYZ. And I go up and down, and I have days where I'm better at it, and I have days where I am not. And when I first started, I would do like a couple of things, and then it'd be 1 o'clock, and I'd be like, wow, I'm pooped. Like, I've done a lot. But that's been a particular place for me where maybe it's not creative necessarily, but it feeds my creative life because when I'm exhausted, I don't want to create. But finding that place and being like, okay, we have to reframe what rest is. Yeah. And change the narrative around that, because what I am telling myself doesn't actually serve me anymore. It probably did at the point when I first started making that the habit. But where I am now, that doesn't serve me. And so it's okay to change that. And it's hard to change that, but it's possible, and it is worth changing it.
Yeah. Oh, Amy, you're the best. Okay, we're going to kind of rapid fire these last two questions. Okay. So the fourth one is, what person, place, or experience has shaped you the most creatively? Probably grad school. Yeah. Probably grad school. And
And particularly Andre Malov-Babel. He's now the head of the program down at FSU Oslo. But Demidov really changed my life.
Yeah.
I have always been an early bloomer, if you will. I started looking at colleges when I was a sophomore in high school. I went to college, and my freshman year, I was like, okay, this is great. I'm going to need grad school. And ended up starting to look at that like freshman year.
Yeah.
Graduated, got into FSU Oslo for the following year. But when I was looking at like, what do I need grad school for? I was like, I need, and all my classmates laughed every single time I said this, but I was like, I am not emotionally available consistently, and I need help doing that. I walked into my audition with Andre. They do URTAs, but I had done a one-on-one. So I walked into my audition with Andre. It was like 20 minutes, and I did my monologues. He then worked my monologues with me, and then we chatted for a couple of minutes. And I got out of the room, I called my parents, and I was like, you have to start praying right now. Like, I have to get into the school because I have to work with this man. I was like, I walked in saying I need to go to grad school to be more emotionally available. And I walked out, I am now emotionally available. And like, it felt like he didn't, like, fix is maybe the wrong word, but it felt like what I wanted to work on had been cracked open in the 20-minute working session with him working on Demidov stuff. So that really, really was an amazing experience.
Game changer.
And listen, every grad program is going to have its problems.
Sure.
I acknowledge that fully, and had my fair share. But that was a really special experience, and I really value Andre as a teacher, as an artist, and I'm very excited for what he's going to be doing down there with that program. So
That's so cool.
I always love hearing stories about teachers that really change your life. That's awesome. Okay, and the final question, what book, play, or film do you think every person should read or watch?
This is so hard. Why do you do this?
I'm sorry.
You can give your top 3 if you need to.
You know, it's so hard because I feel like as soon as I name something, then I'm going to leave. I'm going to be halfway home. And I'm going to be
no,
like,
what about this?
You know what?
You idiot. Why did you say this? The answer is clearly that.
But like in this moment, it's okay if they change over time. That's what I always say.
Yeah. So I recently was asked what my favorite adaptation is. And I pulled this memory out of nowhere. My name is Asher Lev. Book to play.
Okay.
People, run, don't walk. Get your hands on both.
Yeah.
Love the book by
Yeah.
Chaim Potok. The play is stunning.
Yeah.
Especially dealing with art and faith.
Yeah.
The play really does that beautifully. The book does too. But so my name is Asher Lev.
Okay.
You gotta say Walking on Water.
Yeah. It's a
Madeline
good one.
L'Engle, seminal work.
It's a good one.
I'm gonna give you 3 more really fast because
Go.
I can't nail it down.
Yeah.
The War of Art.
Yeah.
Classic as well. You can't not say it. Seth Godin's The Practice
Oh.
is really beautiful. It's about shipping creative work.
Oh, cool.
And it's pithy and it hits hard. And then lastly, the fun one, Thursday Murder Club.
Love that.
Everybody needs to read that.
Yeah.
Everyone needs to read about British old folks in their 80s in a retirement community running around solving crime.
Hey, that sounds amazing.
Listen, it's one of those. I read it. I passed it off to my mom. She passed it off. If you have spent any time in like a retirement community with your grandparents, it will have you in stitches.
Love that.
And if you haven't, it's charming.
It's charming and fun. Yeah.
Do it. So there you go. You asked for 1. I gave you 5.
Hey,
I love it.
now everybody go.
Go.
Okay, so Amy, people can find you on Instagram at Speaking of Amy.
I make no promises of any kind of content.
Never. Never. I get it. Instagram is, it's a whole thing. But maybe some staged reading content soon. So
Who knows?
We'll see.
Who knows?
Everybody
will
just
see.
hit the follow button just to stay tuned.
You know?
We're so excited for you.
Thank you.
So thrilled. And thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you. This has been so fun.
We really appreciate
Happy to
you
do it.
and love you very, very, very much.
Oh, I love you guys too.
All right, y'all. We will see you next time.
Peace.
Thanks for listening to the For the Makers podcast. To find out more about Seated Productions, you can visit our website at www.seatedproductions.com and follow us on Instagram at seated.productions. And if you love what we do and want to support us, you can make a tax-deductible donation by visiting our website or by following the link in our podcast description. Until next time, listen well and tell stories.